Hi, Jegaysus.
Hi, heathen. Just the one.
Welcome. I know, singular heathen. Unless we want to count Josh as a heathen, but I'm not sure.
Why not? Respectable
you have to,
heathen.
earn the status. You know what I mean? Wilden. No. Anyway, welcome to another episode of Unholy Trinity, where you come for the gospel and stay for the gossip. At this point, you might just come for the gossip. I don't really know. Maybe. So today we have the incomparable Dr. Josh on with us. Yeah.
I was going to say honorable, and I'm like, maybe that's a judge thing. So maybe.
Either of those seem to fit
Josh
well.
with us. So, if any of y'all have been, alive on Christian or atheist social media this week, you have seen all of the incredibly embarrassing Christian apologists in the jungle showing their entire baboon ass trying to defend biblical slavery. Mm. And when slavery comes up, you only think of one thing. Josh. Sorry.
It's true. It's true. You can't get away from it.
Cultural
What is
genocide?
the one thing? Yeah, no. A white man. Just kidding. Sorry.
Fair.
So anyway, in all seriousness, when anybody wants to discuss slavery, they talk to Dr. Josh, perhaps because he wrote an entire book on it. I don't know. That could be it. Maybe it's some other reason. Maybe it's his charm and good looks. Who knows? But we have him with us to discuss this. I will be here to make fun of these morons. Should be an interesting episode. Matt, you choose. Choose your fighter.
Okay, so I was gonna say I'll be the negative, neutral, in between ground, but I was like that doesn't work for slavery. There's no neutral in slavery.
Yeah. You're either owner or owned. There's no middle ground. So, okay, let's start with this. I am a boomer at heart, so I don't know how to share this to my screen. I don't really care. I'm just going to read it to you. There was some bozo on Twitter whose profile photo is him deadlifting like 95 pounds with lifting straps. Which, okay, if you're not a weightlifter, let me tell you, you only use lifting straps when you're doing heavy pulls, and you've done an entire weightlifting session, so your hands and grip are totally fatigued. He has them on. His ass cheeks are as tight. I'm just gonna crack that walnut. With negligible weight on the bar, and I wouldn't usually yes, I would. But his tweet says this, and then y'all can come for my morals for making fun of him. In cultures without a financial safety net, the slave would likely starve to death or die of exposure in the wilderness. What's your source there, buddy? Treatment of the slave, and, with two Ds, the purpose of the slavery is what makes it right or wrong. I repeat, treatment and purpose of the slavery is what makes it right or wrong to own another human being. Slavery isn't wrong in and of itself.
Is that the whole tweet?
That's the fucking tweet.
Okay, I'm digesting, but also so ready
Take
to go.
Take a moment.
Can we, I want to start on what the fuck? With the wilderness. In the wilderness. They're going to die in the wilderness. Like they're a wild animal, not a person?
Right.
What does that mean?
This sounds like justification for a zoo.
Yeah.
What would they do if we couldn't take care of them in the zoo?
You can't put lions back in the wild. They won't know how to hunt.
I mean, this is...
Shoot me.
This is so ridiculous from any number of directions. One of which being... we can step outside of the Bible for a minute and just go to the wider ancient Near East. Starting at least in the second millennium, but I think we have examples of it in the third, but it's most famously maybe in the first dynasty of Babylon with Hammurabi and with Amisaduka. You have the kings, when they come to the throne or periodically throughout their reign, they declare freedom to the people of Babylon. And what they're doing is they're releasing everyone from countryman to countryman debt, right? So if you have a debt slave, if you have someone that has some crushing loan or something, the king declares that all of that, the slate is wiped clean. And it's a big reset on the economy. Right now, I'm not an economist, but
I am.
But you are. And so, what
Kind of.
What they were trying to do is to try to keep this disparity, this great separation between the very wealthy and the very poor, try to keep that closer together. And so, the idea that we would, for example, set a slave free, and that would somehow be, equated with exposing them to death. I mean, it's the whole point of the declaring freedom, right? It's called Anduraru in Akkadian. It's like it has its own term. It's declaring this thing to free them from their debt. And I mean, certainly when you come to the biblical text in Exodus 21, Deuteronomy 15, this is exactly what they're doing, right? They're saying you can only keep them for 6 years. Now, in Exodus 21, they just get set free. So, I mean, why on earth? They're in a far worse position having been a slave for 6 years than what they were in before, right? Because for that 6 years, you're not getting paid, right? And you're not able to work your land. You're not able to make any money. Think about how debt slaves come about. I mean, you see this in the biblical text. You see a pretty clear example of this in 2 Kings 4, right? If you guys are familiar with Elisha, and he goes to the widow who has 2 sons, and her husband has died, and he's taken out this loan, and he hasn't repaid it, and so now the creditor is coming to collect her 2 kids, right, as slaves.
Of course.
Now, the widow woman doesn't say, "Yes, oh, thank God, the creditor is coming
We're
to
saved.
take my 2 kids. Now we're going to be okay."
No, we're all
man, it's
fucked
rough
now.
out here on these streets, right? No, they're like, "Elisha, please help us, help me. It will be far, far worse for us." I mean, give me a break. So this is why this notion that they would just want to stay slaves, right? They would just want to stay because
It's
just
incredibly
so much.
paternalistic, like incredibly paternalistic, to think like I know better than this people group, what they need or what they want, and the only way for them to succeed, the only way for them to thrive, is if I am in control of what they're doing, because they're not capable of thriving on their own. It's very much the same bullshit-ass colonial mindset that gave us antebellum slavery. And the reasoning behind it may be slightly different, but I don't even know that it's that different, because the rules for debt slavery were really only in place, correct me if I'm wrong, for Hebrew slaves. If you were taken from surrounding areas or through war or whatever other way, then you were a chattel slave. You were there for life.
Right.
You were property. You could be passed down to your children. Yeah. So, like, this argument from fucking Bobo the clown over here is saying that, like, those people that you took from other lands, the only way that, like, they could function in society and be successful is if I own them. Or,
I mean,
you could just let them be in your society. I don't know. It's crazy.
Well, I mean, this is where I just wonder, are they actually reading the text?
No.
Because the verses that are always talked about, right, in Leviticus 25, 44 to 46, those are the verses that say,
keep
as
them
for your
for
male
life.
and female slaves. Yeah. But the person that's being taken, the Hebrew word is toshav, and it comes from the root yashav, which means to like sit or to dwell. So it's been argued recently, I think pretty convincingly, this is a person it's obviously a person that's dwelling in the land, but it's probably like a tenant farmer. So, let's say I'm a foreigner, I'm from Moab, let's say, or I'm from Edom, and I come into Canaan, and or I come into Israel. I don't have land of my own, right? Because all of that land has been divided, at least according to the narrative, amongst the tribes. So you don't have your own land. So what do? Well, you can go to, let's say an Israelite landowner and say, hey, can I rent out a part of your field? Right? And I will pay you from the excess that I make, I will pay you X amount of grain or something every year.
Yeah.
Or from my produce, whatever it is that you're making. Well, those tenant farmers they're renting out fields, right? So that means that if they have a bad crop year or have a second bad crop year or whatever, they might not be able to pay that rent. And so now,
does this sound familiar to y'all? I feel like I've heard this somewhere before. Great minds.
But this is one of the ways that a foreigner can fall into debt. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you keep reading and you get down to verse 47 of Leviticus 25, it says, if the toshav, that same person, that same tenant farmer, becomes very wealthy and gets so wealthy that he can get his own Hebrew slaves, Israelite slaves, then here's what you do. So it's juxtaposing two potential situations that the toshav could find himself in. One is he has, he has failure in his tenant farming and becomes destitute and has to sell himself as a slave. This is what you do. If that toshav, however, becomes, very successful, has great crop years, whatever, it starts to make a lot of excess and, sells it and builds some wealth. And then he is able, through that, excess income to give out loans to Israelites and then collect on them by making them debt slaves. This is what the law says has to happen. So the idea that a foreigner can't do well in Israel is just flatly contradicted by the text itself that we're talking about. Right? I mean, it's so clear.
I will
and surprising.
Tell you a thing. They don't read the text. They
especially probably not in that way where they're looking to Hebrew words and seeing what sitting means, but
they're only looking for what agrees with them. That's it, right? Or what their pastor told them, or whatever the hell they're listening to. But ex-Christian here, nobody is like critically reading the texts, because if they were critically reading the texts, I've got bad news. Most of us critically read the text and got the fuck out. No, not everybody, right? Of course, not everybody. But like when you start to see all of this weirdness, and not even weirdness, right? Because it makes perfect sense that in that time and place you'd have laws that say these things. It's just the fact that in 2022 you have Chad and Brad trying to defend biblical slavery because they need it to be moral so that their inerrancy doctrine works is silly. It's beyond silly. It's offensive, to be honest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I also, if they read anything
and it's dangerous.
Ever, of course, yeah. If they read anything ever, they know that like the doctrine of inerrancy is kind of not that old. I mean, obviously it has roots in older traditions, but like it's not that old. And so like this idea that everything needs to be 100% factual and defensible is just not how most Christians throughout history have read the Bible. But don't worry, we got the Reformed theologians here to let us all know exactly what the Bible says and what it's always meant.
And in reality, I feel like there's possible ways in which you could hold inerrancy to be true and still condemn slavery. And I think they're taking the lazy way out of the situation. Even if they want to play mental gymnastics, they can do so in a way in which it's like, I mean, I hate the argument I've heard. It's not the one I'm going to support, but they're always like, oh, well, God said if you're going to do it, here is some laws to do it anyway. Like, you're going to do what you're going to do, so as long as you follow these laws, at least some people will be spared. And I hear that argument a lot. I'm like, okay, you're getting close, but there's ways in which you can be like, this is still a record and not necessarily part of the law, therefore, or like, the Torah law.
Yeah.
It is part of the Torah law, actually. Anyway, there's ways around it. And still you can hold inerrancy. I think people are just lazy.
Well, and the other thing, and I've said this on other streams, and it made the bros mad, and I do not give a fuck. The only people that are out here defending slavery, I mean, at least the majority, the vast majority, are white men. I wonder why that could be.
Surprising.
Because they could never, ever, ever picture themselves in any position that isn't numero uno, right? So they don't even know what it feels like to be marginalized or oppressed in any way whatsoever. So in their minds, it would just be like, oh yeah, I would treat my slaves well. As opposed to,
they're considering it an employee situation.
Slave? Yeah, exactly. Like, I would have an employee. Like, okay, what if you were the slave with a shitty master and you're getting the shit kicked out of you every day? How do you feel about the morality of that situation?
And this is the problem, right? Because it's not even we're not even requiring shitty masters in order for this to be a shitty situation.
Of course,
because if you read through the Proverbs, for example, like if you look at Proverbs 29, 19 to 21. But this one is a servant is not like motivated, right? It's the same principle, right? But specifically for slaves, he's not motivated by words alone, right? And a spoiled or a spoiled slave, becomes, and it's a little complicated what the Hebrew says there, but it's essentially like that you can't just tell them to work. It's physical.
You need to drive them.
Yeah, they have to be physically motivated.
Which reminds me of a certain group of North American white men who took those verses a little too seriously.
Doug Wilson.
So it's just incredibly problematic when you're coming to this, beginning with the conclusion that we have to be able to get our morals from this ancient text. And I think that's really the issue, the heart of the issue here.
Yeah, 100%. Well, it's not even just the inerrancy, it's specifically the morality that's buried into it, where every single thing is supposed to be a map of life.
What they're saying is, this is I have problems with all of this argument, but like, God is the objective standard bearer for morality, right? Like, everything good, like, that's the argument we get all the time, right? Well, how do you know right from wrong if you're an atheist? How do you have a moral compass if you're an atheist? And I'm like, trust and believe, brother, that my moral compass is a lot stronger than yours. But that's their argument, right? So there's this objective morality that is found in God and in God only, and therefore everything he does has to be moral, right? He's this like omniscient, benevolent, loving, compassionate, fair, just, yada, 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 the same yesterday, today, and forever. And yet, couldn't tell people not to own other people. Like, he gave the Israelites so many laws. It makes my eyes bleed when I read them, like, through. He gave them so many laws that made them different from other people groups, but forgot to tell them not to own others. He, like, when people are like, oh, he's just working in the existing system. I'm like, he told the Israelites to cut off part of their penis. You think that was part of the existing system? Like, really, like, he's working within the existing system, then why all the other rules?
Nowhere in the text does it say that God is perfect. That's, again, an assumption that comes within this weird Christian worldview.
I feel like I'm raging, but it's because I've spent the last 72 hours trying to explain to people why you shouldn't own somebody else. Like, God.
Yeah.
That Twitter fights are a problem, for sure. Have you heard about...
other people.
I haven't heard this until recently, I guess, but how fundamental Christian kids are being taught that slavery was okay because the slaves were ultimately saved. The U.S. slavery, specifically. Because the slaves were converted to Christianity while they were on the plantations and in these situations. It was worthwhile because they became saved. Thoughts?
Who was it? Like, who was it that...
My thoughts are fuck off. That's my thought. Like, that's my thought.
Good answer, yes.
Yeah.
Like, who was it that said, it might have been SJ.
Oh, God.
She made the comment.
That fucking bleach mop.
She made the comment that...
She made a coherent comment?
Like, it was about the... I think it was about the Amalekite genocide in 1 Samuel 15.
Oh, my God.
But it might have also been about the children, the babies in the flood. But the comment was...
I know what he's gonna...
What was the way that she described it?
They weren't murdered. They were relocated to heaven.
Relocated. That's
Jesus
right. They were
Christ.
relocated
I'm gonna relocate
to heaven.
your ass if you don't shut up. Like,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
It was rough to hear. And I don't want to speak to her intentions, because I mean I can believe that her intentions, at least to her, are good, right? It's just, it's such a problematic way, obviously, to put it lightly, of thinking about these things, and because then,
she views these people as less than. They weren't the Israelites, so therefore they were less important. It is impossible to be raised in the Christian church and not have that built into you. Like, it's built into you. I mean, it's like the comment I got on YouTube today about how the genocide was totally justified because these other people were corrupted genetically.
Right.
That's eugenics, but okay. Corrupted genetically. I mean, they went on to say a whole bunch of other, like, super offensive shit, but, like, that's the sort of natural outflow, if you go far enough, of what you're taught in the Christian church, because you're taught that these other people were wicked, that Yahweh hated them, that they weren't following Yahweh, and therefore they are deserving of death. So
you see that with the flood narrative, and you see it generationally when they talk about babies being flooded, and that's like, well, that was the sin of their parents, and got to nip it at the bud.
Or it's like the babies being dashed on the rocks. Nah, it's fine. It's fine. They were Amalekites or Midianites or whatever, right? Like, their parents were awful. They were definitely going to grow up to be awful too, so just, like, fuck them.
No, I think one of the problematic things, and I have a chapter in Volume 2 of the Atheist Handbook about, violence and genocide, and obviously the problems with that, not only from an apologetic standpoint, but just from a modern sense, utilizing even if you're not going to the biblical text strictly for your morality, you're just keep thinking of it as a sacred or a holy text. And what I do instead of making strict arguments about things like genre and hyperbole and all these other things, all I do is go to Neo-Assyrian kings, kings from the end of the second millennium and during the first millennium. And I show in their royal inscriptions, which we have extant, right? You can go see them in museums, where they talk about how their god, Asher, was so gracious, so loving, so benevolent, extended a benevolent arm to these foreign peoples. And in their sin and rebellion, they did evil in the eyes of Asher.
Oh my God,
and
it sounds so familiar.
The king who's writing...
I heard this before.
The king who's writing this royal inscription about going and, either killing them or, taking plunder or both, says that he is doing Asher's will. And just punishing these evil people. And in fact, in certain literary texts, you have the narrative putting in the mouths of these foreign kings how they've sinned against, the Assyrian deity. Like, oh my, I realize now just how awful and wicked that I've been. And now I've brought this on myself, so then the question just becomes, So are you good with that, Christian apologists? Like, are we okay with the Neo-Assyrian king? Is it cool that Tiglath-Pileser III in 740 is like going out and kicking ass and taking names? Because
not Tiglath-Pileser in 730.
Well, I think that they would be. I mean, this is like a Christian nationalism problem, right? Like, if you look at the rhetoric that Donald Trump was using the entire time he was in office, saying anyone coming across the border was automatically an enemy of the state who was a rapist and a drug trafficker, and these other people are coming to just commit sins on our soil. It's the exact same narrative that they've used, and now you see it in the war that's going on right now with these same kind of Christian nationalists who are like, well, Putin has to step into Ukraine to take care of, you know, the savage, or who was it? There was the, like, Congress member who was saying that, like, the failed congressperson who said she supports Vladimir Putin because he's a Christian and he's bringing Christianity to Ukraine. And I'm like, Ukraine super Catholic,
is Christian,
but...
I mean, like, effectively, right? Like, it's the same. Like, it's the same.
Yes.
Where do you think
they're both
Christianity
Catholics? They're both
from?
Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox.
Right, like, it's the same. No, sorry, this is off topic, but I've been seeing this on social media, and it has made me livid. I know, hard to believe. Me, mad about something. These Christian missionaries that are going to the border of Ukraine and Poland and trying to witness to people that are literally just trying to get their families across the border. I have been tempted myself to fly there and choke them out. Because, like, it's so fucking disrespectful.
Let's start a GoFundMe and do it. Let's do that.
You guys get the funds.
We can do, like, a barricade thing, like an anti-protest barricade around them as they move into Poland.
Like,
block them.
I will go to the border, and as they're witnessing, I will just read them down to the boots. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Tell them about themselves. Because that is the most exploitative bullshit I have seen in my life. And to be fair, like, I get it. I get it to a degree, right? Because I grew up in this church, and I grew up in this, like, bullshit mindset that, like, when someone's in need, that's when they're most likely to turn to Jesus, right? So, like, we gotta go share the gospel in their moment of need. And what they need is not the gospel. What they need is some fucking housing and food and clothing and, like, a way to safety. They don't need your, like, chick track at the border. Like,
be an actual Samaritan instead of a preacher.
I would probably physically harm them. But hey, that's for legal purposes.
Maybe you shouldn't go. I'll go.
Yeah. For legal purposes,
I'll go in my Jesus outfit.
Oh, go Jegaysus and be like, these, I don't know them. These aren't my people.
Not today, Satan. Not today. Keep it walking. Walk right past them.
Keep it walking. Y'all keep it moving. Jesus escort. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I got us off topic. But also, if any of those people are watching, you fucking suck. Yeah, back
I would
to
love
slavery.
for them to watch. That'd be great.
Oh my God, dude. If you're watching, call me. You know? I just want to talk. The amount of fuckery that I'm seeing just, like, left and right. I mean, I saw someone the other day suggest that Zelensky was the Antichrist.
Well,
Bitch,
that's pretty common with people who are anti-Semitic, so...
I'm
not surprised by that at all.
Literally is Jewish.
That's
like
why it's not shocking.
Maybe he's not a Jew. He's Jewish. And also, like, the nerve that it takes to make every humanitarian crisis about you.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, there's a war in Ukraine? Oh, I knew it. I knew this was going to be the end times. Time for Jesus to come back. And then you don't do jack shit about anything except for congratulate yourself and then, like, evangelize harder to people that don't give a shit because they're worried about what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, well, in those moments, you don't want to stop the war, right? Because Matthew 24, right? I mean, you want the shit to continue, but you want to get those people saved while it's happening. But, you know, we got to get to heaven, so let's get this shit popping.
It's like the same people that claim to, like, love Israel. We love Israel, all the while thinking that the Jews killed their own savior. And then only being interested in Israel as it pertains to the rebuilding of the temple so that Jesus can then come back and annihilate everyone that doesn't believe in him, including the Jews.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sorry,
That's
this is my weekly...
What is it that you say?
Accumulated a lot of rage.
What is it that you say?
This week.
Brain small? Brain small? Is that what?
Oh, yeah. Brain small.
How you say it?
Lots of
Brain
Christians with small brain. Like, sorry, I've derailed us completely. This week on social media,
it's an effect of evangelical Christianity, and we all recognize it for what it is, and that's what's so frustrating being on the outside of it. And so, like, I feel your frustration because, of course, we would have 15 years ago, 10 years ago, however long years ago, would have been right there. We would have been reading Left Behind again right now, preparing for the rapture. Like, we would be like,
Still
oh my god,
here,
the tribulations are coming. Yeah,
God.
Like right now I probably would be doomsday prepping, which maybe I should do anyways because like nuclear war is a reality, but for the rapture instead, you know what I mean? And so like I get it because I was that kid who was terrified at every turn that there was going to be a freaking plague and food would run out and I would have to be killing rats and eating them in the street. And there is, but get different reasons and in a different level than I was shown on Kirk Cameron's movies. Kirk.
I mean, I guess like something that's funny to me, and again, this is so far off topic, but like we understand now in this day and age that if you keep going up, you don't get to heaven. You just get farther out into the universe, right? Like we know, unless you think that like literally everything is fake, but that's whatever. And yet we're still like, no, the rapture will happen because we're going to be caught up with him in the clouds. And then what, bitch? And then what? You've been on a plane, right? Like,
right, but I think we've solved this, right? Because the wormhole theory, right?
Oh God, what? How are we using wormholes?
Oh my fucking God, dog!
We're gonna rapture through a wormhole? Is that what's going on?
Listen, I'm gonna tell you a tale. I posted on my Twitter, have me on your YouTube channel so we can make fun of Christian apologists. And the like one Christian apologist that I was letting slide, because I was like, he seems okay, retweeted it and was like, wow, what an offer. And I was like, hello. So I began collecting information on his whack ass, and found out that he thinks, hi Randy, that Jesus ascended to heaven via a wormhole. He wrote an entire book.
That was Randall
Rouser. Yeah. Your boy.
Oh, you know him. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
The plot thickens.
Yeah. I also found out he's writing a book.
What is different from that and saying, like... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, he's writing a book, basically that's anti-LGBTQ, as far as I can tell. And all I can say is, you think you're going to take the moral high ground with me? Because I'm going to make fun of you? You're literally pushing a narrative that gets people killed.
Fact.
May the meanest bitch win.
That surprises
No, I hope that
me.
you do have this conversation because I would be interested in watching. But what I was going to say is, what is the difference between saying that Jesus was raptured through a wormhole and then turning around and being like, yeah, Jesus wasn't an alien? That would be ridiculous. Because, like, you're right up on the same page. You might as well just say Jesus was an intergalactic being who came down, taught us how to use technology, and before that we were all animals who couldn't control from killing each other, and he taught us how.
I mean, I feel like saying Jesus is an intergalactic being is really not that far off the mark. Like, of what they're saying, right? Like,
right. It's the same thing.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Which is fine. Like, roll with it. Let's go crazy with it.
Let's go. Love it. Jesus is an alien.
Reinvent Christianity, yo. Wormhole, Jesus, alien thing, yeah.
Let's all do acid now. Josh, what were you trying to say before we went on our long, strange trip?
I feel like his book on the Canaanites, I haven't been able to read it all the way through, but from what I've read, I mean, he's certainly very critical of like standard apologetics, like violence apologetics.
He's one of those
it just
people
surprises
that
me.
likes to say a lot of words that mean very little. I watched one of his videos and it was like, can you be gay and Christian? And he's like, well, I'm not going to tell you a straight answer. Let's approach the question. What do you mean by can you be gay? What do you mean by bitch, shut the fuck up. are you LGBTQI affirming or not? Like, all of these words are not telling me whether or not you're a bigot. Turns out you are. Sorry, like, if
I mean, both could be true. He could be, like, digging through Canaanite history and have, like, some good scholarly criticism and still be a homophobe. It's fine.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
and the tweet that I saw put out was that he was being accused of being a universalist and being, like, affirming, and he was like, neither of those are true, and I'm writing this book, it's going along well, and I was like, time to get rocked. So, yeah. I have, no problem with dragging that guy right over the coals.
I feel like I'm missing out on a lot on Twitter. I'm never on there. It sounds like there's a lot of drama and fights going on.
I am exactly this way everywhere.
Oh, no, I know that for sure.
Well, no, and so you will see, if you ever pop back on Twitter, that I pull no punches with people. And also, like, I'm not ever going to apologize for being mean to a bigot.
Fair.
Like, that's it, period. That's the tweet. You know, in the words of our Lord and Savior, Drew Afualo, may the meanest bitch win.
So, okay, let's get back to slavery and enslaved people for a second here. So, I guess what I was going to say is, what would your level of concern be that these people who are slavery apologists, slavery apologists.
Slavery.
What is your concern level, what is your concern level that they would someday in the future want to enact something similar to what we saw back in the antebellum period?
Yeah.
What do you think their push would be? Do you think it's a 1-to-1 ratio, or do you think it's like a half thing going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why in the section of Volume 1 of the book, in the Atheist Handbook, I talk about, I show a comparison between the laws that were on the books in the antebellum South and how the judges, during certain cases of, like slave abuse and, when a slave was killed, how they wrestled with, first of all, how they identified whether it was actual abuse or actual murder.
Right.
And then the rationale for doing so.
Well, yeah, it was justified versus malicious.
Oh, I was like,
yeah, so I mean, the laws. Right. Well, so, if you think about, or if you read through what they say in the laws, particularly in like places like Virginia, they'll say things like it is illegal, and how is it worded? Certainly nothing that like a good Christian would do to abuse a slave, right? It's illegal to abuse a slave. And obviously then it was illegal to murder them. In fact, some of the laws said that to murder a slave would carry the penalty as if one murdered a free white person.
No, it wouldn't.
Which sounds very... Well,
it did.
So this is... But see, this is where I think we have to, make sure we're very careful. Because when apologists come to this, what they're doing when they say, well, obviously slavery in the Hebrew Bible or in the Old Testament was nothing like slavery in the antebellum South, what they're doing is they're saying the slavery and the laws of the Old Testament was nothing like what was practiced, what actually happened in the antebellum South. And that's a bullshit comparison, right? And it's incredibly dangerous.
Was that a cuss word?
Because when you actually compare the laws to the laws, it will freak you the fuck out, right?
Sure.
Because what they're doing in the antebellum South is the judges are saying, well, look, masters have to be able to beat their slaves.
They're exactly the same.
Like, yeah, I mean, they got to be able to do it. Right, that's what they're thinking, because they think, well, I mean, that slave is there
to work.
If they work real hard, it's not like they get freed earlier or something, right? So they know that they're there. So how do you motivate them? How do you make them work, right? Yeah. So masters have to be able to beat them. This is the rationale. But we don't want masters abusing, and we don't want them murdering. So how do we balance the right of the master to beat their slave?
What are we considering abuse, though?
Right. Well, see, this is what they're trying to work out. Right.
Trying to split it between like discipline versus like wanton fun of just like hitting for no reason.
That's right. So
like,
how do you?
Who is there differentiating it though? Who is like, okay, I'm gonna watch you do this. Like you're not having any fun.
Self-regulation. They are upstanding Christian men, and it's self-regulation.
Listen, all I can tell you is that if you're looking at the upstanding Christian men of today, the large majority of them are protecting people that protected sexual abusers. So I have literally zero faith that anybody throughout history that was a good, upstanding Christian man has the self-control or, like, moral fiber to actually do the right thing, because they're still beating another human being.
There it is, yep.
Sorry, I have so much hostility this week. Love y'all. So, the other day, I was on TikTok. I posted a video about slavery, because for some reason, in the year of our Lord Beyonce 2022, I'm still trying to convince people that owning somebody else is wrong. It was not on my bingo card, but here we are. And so I posted a video about it, and someone really just hopped right into my comments saying, well, there was... you know, you could only be a slave for 7 years and then you were set free and blah, 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 blah. To which I said, yeah, that's one kind of slavery that was in the Bible, but it's certainly not the only kind. There was also chattel slavery in which you were owned 5 ever. And so then they went on to argue with me. So I just pulled up Leviticus and was like, you can keep your slaves for life and pass them on to your children. And this absolute potato said, you need to look up the definition of chattel slavery. I'm pretty sure I don't, actually. I know a couple. I know a guy. You know what I mean? I know a guy.
I know a guy.
I also know what chattel slavery is.
I was gonna say, I would have copy and pasted the definition in.
Right, like, you don't really need to know anybody special to know what the definition of chattel slavery is, but if y'all are really gonna press me, I know a guy, you know? And that guy is Josh. So why don't you talk a little bit about those 2 types of slavery, and I don't know how, like, I feel like, I want to say, like, and how they're both bad, but, like, that should be self-evident. Because slavery, say it with me.
Break it down for the apologist here.
Is bad.
It's bad.
Anyway, I'm just...
This is why... Okay, before you go into the definition of, like, the difference between chattel slavery versus, like, debt slavery, this is why I think it's so scary and terrifying that we have these people who are, like, take racism out of education or whatever it is. Like, these people already don't understand how it's bad, and they still have, like, very much a narrative in the South that, like, oh, these plantation owners actually never even beat their slaves. They never even hit their slaves. Like, they were very kind and generous with their slaves, or should I say enslaved people. And so they already have this myth running through their heads, and the fact that they want to push more of that context out of our history is terrifying. Because they don't understand.
And also, the fact that they're like, take CRT out of our schools. It's not in our schools.
Never has been.
It's in high-level college education, not your kids, like, K through 12. They're gonna get the same
Yeah, talking about the Civil War
bullshit.
is not the same thing as critical race theory.
Right, like, Stonewall Jackson, critical race theory, not synonymous. I know, it's hard to believe. But yeah, it is terrifying.
Anyway.
And, yeah, you know, sorry. Y'all, I'm on one.
Back to chattel slavery versus debt slavery, sorry. Go.
Yeah, I mean, so it's pretty straightforward. Honestly, I mean, as far as in the scholarship, in the secondary literature, what they'll say is essentially that you have slavery, which is, one person has ownership rights either temporarily or indefinitely, and controls and benefits from the labor output of the individual that is owned. Now, there are often different rules, usually in favor, more favorable to a debt slave than to a chattel slave. But essentially, the distinction between the two is that a debt slave is someone who is owned or controlled as a slave. But it's not the same type of ownership because their slavery is contingent upon the repayment of a debt. So oftentimes debt slaves can't be sold or traded in the same way that a chattel slave can because they're not property in the same way. A chattel slave, however, is essentially a slave whose slavery is not contingent upon the repayment of a debt. So what that means is when you see someone who is a slave, who is a slave indefinitely, it doesn't mean that they could never be released because the master could say, I'm not benefiting enough from your labor because you're not producing enough and you're actually consuming more resources of mine than you are producing, and so I'm going to free you, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that they can never be released. But what it means is there's no stipulation that requires it, right? So, but that's essentially but they become movable property, right? They're, now, one of the things that I hear all the time that is a misnomer is that if they're property, that means they have no rights. And it's just a silly notion, right? And you won't be able to, you won't find a way to have that play out.
My dog,
for
has
example,
rights.
Yes, of course.
Like,
and
which
slaves,
I'm in support of, but like,
believe it or not,
still.
Slaves in the antebellum South had rights.
Yeah, in theory.
Were they ever enforced? No, of course not. But that's the material point, right? That's what we need to remember. And that's why I'm going to go back to this for just a second. We've got to be careful to not so quickly skip over the fact that there were laws that were in theory supposed to protect slaves in the antebellum South. Now, I know why we do. Believe me, I know why we do. Because what the thing that we're trying to keep slavery apologists of the Old Testament or Old Testament slavery apologists from doing by focusing in on rights that slaves had is the thing that we're trying to keep ourselves from doing in modern time, right? With antebellum slavery. But what we need to do is allow just enough time, because of the situation that we're in, with people, a large segment of the population who follow the biblical text as a guide for their morality. We need to be able to stay in that uncomfortable zone very carefully and very strategically for just a minute and say, look, if you're going to focus in on the laws of the Old Testament and say, well, look, they were able to worship on the Sabbath and they could only be beaten so much and they had to be freed. Certain had to be freed after 6 years, and you couldn't just go killing them. If you're going to make those arguments, just think about, you have to make the same arguments can be made for the laws in the antebellum South. And do you want to do that? And the answer for most people, no. I would think, hopefully, would be no, right? After Twitter this week, I'm not sure about that as much. But
there's a good grip of Americans who want a race war to happen. So,
but this is the issue, right? When you point out to somebody, hey, did you know you weren't allowed to abuse a slave in the antebellum South according to the law?
No, because they're morons.
Like, it makes them think, hopefully it will make them think ultimately, well, wait a minute. The same thing that the judges in the antebellum South were wrestling with about master having right to beat the slave, but the slave having rights not to be abused and murdered. Well, Jesus Christ, it's the same shit that you see in Exodus 21. It's exactly the point. And you were asking the question earlier, well, how do you know? Who determines that? That's the point of Exodus 21, 20 to 21. That's what he's doing. How is it that in this situation we can determine whether it was abuse or if it was moderate correction? And this is how they went about doing it. The legal rationale was, well, look, if he dies immediately, clearly that was malicious. That was intending to be abuse. But if there's some time that goes by and he dies, well, we got to give the master the benefit of the doubt there. Because had he been really trying to kill him, he would have died immediately, right? So we have to give him the benefit of the doubt. Once you do that, and then go and look at the laws in the antebellum South, I hope it makes you sick, right, listener, if that may be defending Old Testament slavery. And I encourage you can look in my book in the chapter on slavery, but go pick up Thomas Morris's book on the laws in the South prior to the Civil War. Email me, digitalhammurabi@gmail.com. I'll get you the bibliographic information. But just go read his book, and you'll walk away from that going, well, fuck, I need to stop defending slavery in the Hebrew Bible as moral.
Okay, beyond all of that, which, yes, mic drop. Owning another person is wrong.
Yes.
No matter how you do it.
I'll write that in my notes. 1 second.
Yeah, I know. You might have to sit with it for a while and really think about it deeply.
And if you don't understand, maybe tattoo it on your arm. That way you can just look down and remember. If you don't
understand, sign your life over to me and I'll make it visible. Hell, just come stay with me for a month and I'll make you rethink that. But it just is mind-bending to me that people are really out here still in the year 2022 defending slavery in any capacity. I really had people also
which can lead us right into the whole fact that we still have a prison system that allows for slavery. So.
Right. Well, someone really said in my comments well, slavery is illegal today. So, and I was like, first of all, it's not.
It has conditions.
Second of all, and what about it? If you're going to say you have an objectively moral God, then it should have always been wrong. But also, thanks to the old 13th Amendment, it's not illegal if you are an incarcerated person.
Yep.
Look, go read it yourself. Watch the documentary. Read another book outside the Bible. People...
I've gotten to arguments with people before that say that even us as free people are inherently within a capitalist society, therefore we are slaves to debt and to treasurers and to just the system.
But
and
in
that's not the point.
A more theoretical sense, right? It's a much more theoretical sense. Right. And people love to turn these arguments, especially people that would not have been slaves in the past, into this devil's advocate theoretical sort of arena in which you're trying to sort of compete with these ever-moving goalposts. And I'm sorry, but that's just not the reality. That's not the reality of what it was, right? So, sure, you work for a company right now, and maybe you are in debt, and maybe you're not making enough, but you can leave. You can leave. There are differences. Also, nobody is physically whipping you, and nobody else has the right to your autonomy. Is it a fucked up system? Is there problems? Absolutely.
Obviously.
But both of those things
different
conversations. Can be true. Right,
Mm-hmm.
we have a fucked up system. We have a lot of problems. It's shitty. But also, I'm sorry, are we passing people down through generations? Anyone? Are you? If so, send me an email, because y'all need help. But people are not property, and that's the point. Why am I still talking about this?
I think this is So this is something that's pretty common in apologetic circles. So when you think about the Hebrew word for slave, eved, it's a fairly versatile term. It's polyvalent, right? So you can use it. I guess something akin to it would be like boss, right? Boss can be used in a whole bunch of different contexts, right? Or son, or man, right? There are lots of different contexts that those words can be used, and they'll have different shades of meaning. And Jess, you always talk about a Venn diagram, right?
Being a circle.
Yeah, but in linguistics, right, in philology, when you're trying to determine what a word means in a foreign language and trying to bring it over into another language, you have to be very careful about assessing the nuance in each context. And so what Christian apologists will do is they will say, all right, well, look, Eved, it can, a king that is a slave to, like a vassal king that's a slave to, the person that he's subjected to, he'll call himself, he'll say, my lord, your slave says, blah, blah, blah. But he's a king, right? So he's not actually a slave, right? He's not like working in the Pharaoh's house or something. And like Moses was called Yahweh's slave. And, you have the slave in the book of Isaiah. And all of these things. So what they'll do is they'll try to use that Venn diagram where there's some overlap in the usages of this word, because there's some commonality between all of them, right? In the same way that
on the edges,
right? So, like, if I were to say my nose is running, the car is running, Johnny is running, the refrigerator is running, all of those would have their own circles, and there would be some overlap a little bit in the middle, right? There's a reason that the word running is used there. But certainly you can't then apply all of this circle's meaning to this circle's meaning. It just doesn't work that way. And this is what happens, though, in apologetics. They'll say, well, wait a minute, Eved can be used in all these different contexts. Therefore, it's not so bad.
Yeah.
Right? And this is what I see in things like, basketball players are owned. Right? And you're a slave to your credit card, and you're a slave to your job, or the problem is, or like the military is another example. The problem is that each of these have their own circle of meaning, right? And there is some overlap. There are some commonalities. But you can't then make a one-to-one correspondence between them and say, well, wait a minute, if there's an aspect of ownership, like of ownership of contract rights of a basketball player, well, then that basketball player must be exactly the same as what we see in Leviticus 25. It doesn't work that way.
The audacity of people to even try to make the comparison is beyond my
They do it
if you're arguing that, all you're gonna get from me is a dead stare. Go fucking sit in the corner and think about what you just said, you whack asshole. That is some bullshit. That is some bullshit.
Very prominent. I'm serious now. Very prominent apologists,
that
educated
doesn't make them
apologists.
Not stupid.
No, sure, but what I'm saying is that these are people that are their work is utilized. Another example.
It's utilized. Ew.
If you think
burn the book.
But if you think about violence in the Old Testament, one of the things that you'll see is, and again, these are prominent, educated apologists. They will say, well, it's hyperbolic language when it says kill them all, wipe them out, kill every man, woman, and child. It's sort of like, I've heard this. I shit you not. And you can go read it in their publications. It's like when the Ravens played the Steelers and they said, we really slaughtered the Steelers, right? It doesn't mean that they went and killed them all. It's a figure of speech. Do, huh?
Okay. Yeah.
Again, the Venn diagram, there's a little bit of overlap.
That's fair, but then you know what I would slap him back with is being like, then it's not inerrant.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Like, God.
It's figurative, along with the Genesis story and the flood story, and you're just admitting that it's figurative. Cool.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah. I just hate it here. That's
fair.
That's the long and the short of it. Like,
that's fair.
How is it that we're still having this conversation? And like, I know I've been like ragey this entire episode because I am, but also like the reason I'm ragey is because in 2022, not only are we still arguing over whether or not it's acceptable to have ever owned a human being, like we're actually going downhill in a number of other ways, right? Like
I blame it on freedom of speech.
Yeah,
actually, like I think freedom of speech is the issue. Well, no, I mean it kind of in a way. Like freedom of speech is great, but there should be some levels of censorship. In terms of like, if you think about Germany, you're not allowed to walk around with a swastika in Germany. Why are we allowing that shit in America? In Germany, you're not allowed to say, you know, like, oh, I wish I was part of Hitler's youth. Like, you would get reprimanded and fined for that if you said that in public. So why are we allowing people to march down the street with a Confederate flag? Like, there should be a level of saying, nah, you can't do that.
There should be, but the problem is that the people in power, I think, not everybody, but a large majority of whoever is in power at the time, is either not bold enough or can't get enough consensus, or secretly harbor some biases, right? So, like, it's not on the top of their priority list. And I'm not going to say who's who, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but...
Not even just her, even the old guard, you know.
Oh, no, not even just her. There's, like, and throughout history, right? I'm just thinking of her recently. Sure. And I think a final note before we sort of do a couple of plugs and wrap it up. If slavery was for... You know, it was a part of a God working at a specific time, in a specific place, blah, 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 blah. Then why didn't he ever phase it out? Why does it show up in the New Testament? Why is there never, ever, ever a rule given that's like, stop owning people, you fucking weirdos? Yahweh, probably.
It's going to be in the Bible part 3. We're just waiting for it to drop.
Yeah. If I could, so I'm teaching a class at the end of this month, and it's going to start on March 31st, which is a Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, and it'll be a 90-minute class, and there are 4 of them each Thursday following, and I'll be going through my book on Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery? And one of the things that we're going to cover is just that. Right, because Jess, you that is the perfect question to pose to the individual that makes the argument. Well, God was meeting them where they were; it was condescending to them, and we see this in Matthew 19 with divorce. It wasn't God's way from the beginning, and so then this can just be applied to slavery. The problem is that we don't see it. Right, you see it with divorce, but you can't just posit that God was doing it without any evidence. And in fact, and we'll talk about this in the class, in the New Testament, these so-called places like Galatians 3 and in 1 Timothy 1 and the book of Philemon, you know, these places that are supposed to be doing away with slavery, phasing it out, they're not at all. Jess, as you would say, it's not the flex you think it is, right? And we're even going to get into early Christianity and say, did they pick it up? Like, did they walk away from the biblical text thinking, oh, we shouldn't be doing slavery? No, spoilers. So yeah, if you guys, if anybody watching is interested in taking that class, you can email. Megan is doing it, but I think it's $60 for the 4 classes, and I give you a free copy of the book. You can have a PDF, or I'll send you a paperback
copy.
Sign me
up, you know?
Sounds rad. Wait, can I do a thought experiment real quick before we wrap this up? What? what are the chances? Because I was just thinking about this. If it was explicitly condemned inside the Bible, do you think that the Christian religion as a whole would not have had such a worldwide grip hold? If they were like, hey, you have to treat people with respect and not own them, and you cannot abuse them or take them for wealth or their work or their personhood, do you think Christianity would have survived?
Interesting question.
I feel like that's why the Romans kept it. I feel like that's why it moved on over to, Pope land. I feel like that's why the Protestants were able to have it with feudalism in the UK. It still stayed with Protestants, and then it
I think
came
it was
over
like
here and
a perfect
served a
storm,
purpose.
right? Because lots of ancient religions endorse slavery,
Fair.
right? So
Fair.
but it just happened to be, in my my amateur opinion, sort of a perfect storm where you have these laws from
but that was my point. I feel like they would have thrown out Christianity because it didn't allow for it, and they would have picked up one of the other religions that did.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if Christianity was everyone lives in peace and you don't have control over anyone and blah, 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 but also, maybe it would have been thrown out. But also, I feel like the way that Christianity co-opted the Hebrew scriptures, perhaps would have still led to it being well, they did it back then, and the Bible is perfect. That's my
true.
That's my very paraphrased opinion. But that being said, if you talk to rabbis now about how they view slavery, it's very, very different. You're not going to catch them defending slavery, right? So it's
right.
A very unique Christian perspective that we should be able to morally defend every part of the Bible. Rabbis, at least in my experience, have been very upfront about no, that is bad. No questions asked. Perhaps there was.
Could you imagine them saying, "Well, we should probably still have that rule where you have to marry your rapist because it's there."
Right,
no one's defending that.
As far as I can tell, and if we have any Jewish watchers or listeners, please correct me. But asking questions is a responsibility of the Jewish faith, right? You are required to ask these questions, and then your faith and the texts are considered something that is living. And so it's supposed to grow and evolve. Christianity is not like that. It's incredibly fixed, and it feels like the further away we get from Jesus, his actual life, the more we think that, we need to go back in time, if that makes sense. And, if we were going all the way back in time to, Jesus's red letter teachings, then fine. But what we're really going back to is, 1689. And these reformed bitches that are trying to bring back patriarchy. But that's the problem, right? Is we're not actually going back to Jesus' teachings. We're trying to go back to suck fucking John Calvin or Calvin's dick. Whatever. Anyway, are we not?
I mean, even further, they want some Levitical laws back, so why not just throw it all the way back?
I mean, they want the Levitical laws, but do you think Calvin was defending the Levitical laws? Probably.
But not the shellfish, right? No.
No shellfish, mixed fabrics, okay. Take my polyester pants right to hell. Anyway, we're all the way off topic now. So, something I did want to mention, Josh, your lovely wife Megan will be moderating a debate between Bart Ehrman and Mike Licona. I have to say this, I have no idea how they're going to debate for 7 hours. But
wait, 7 hours?
It is 7 hours.
I did not know that.
And I'm
I was partying here. I was I can't do 7 hours.
Is there new evidence for the resurrection that I'm unaware of? I don't know. But please, really, sorry. I feel like I'm doing two things. I don't mean to detract. I think it's awesome that Megan is moderating. I think everybody should watch it. I am incredibly interested in what these people are going to say that people haven't been saying for the last 2,000 years. But go Megan. That's all I have.
Oh, yeah. And what is it, April 9th?
I don't know.
I think is.
It's your wife.
April 9th is what we've heard from Karayah, our producer, so I'm rolling with it. Speaking of debates, okay, actually, we have a Paul debate coming up on the Unholy Trini-tea channel, specifically cancel Paul versus, I guess, Paul is okay or something. We're going to be doing a live episode for the grand finale between Andrew and myself and the two positions, and that's going to be on April 19th, which is the Tuesday after Easter. So if you want to come see Andrew get absolutely demolished, because obviously Paul's the worst, then show up for that to watch us kind of farcefully duke it out, if you will.
Fisticuffs, if you will. All right. A couple of things that I will be doing. I will be on Biddy Buddha's channel discussing religious trauma from being in a Christian school. So, because my old middle school alma mater taught me that evolution was false because the Loch Ness Monster existed. So, just imagine...
Science.
What's going on up here. Emotional damage.
And Biddy was much in the same situation, so that should be good.
Right, yeah.
You have a lot of shared trauma.
I'm checking on the second thing. I will also be on Neil the 604 Atheist channel on April 2nd at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then, Biddy Buddha's was 9 p.m. Eastern Time, so 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I have a couple of other things that I'm scheduling, but I will announce them separately because I'm not 100% sure on time and place yet. So, Josh, thank you for being here.
Yes,
Josh.
It's always lovely to have you.
Yes, so lovely. Where can we find you?
Yeah.
As if we don't know.
Digital Hammurabi, Hammurabi. We have a YouTube channel. Megan and I are both on Twitter. I think we have like a linked tree or a tree link. Well, we have something, but all those things are linked in our YouTube videos. If you want to find any of the books that I've written or that Megan's written, if you go and search on Joshua Bowen, Bowen, on Amazon, they'll all pop up. So there you go.
And that's on that, All right, so thanks for watching. Thank you for tuning in. We love you. We hate bigots.
We love you. We hate
Apologists
bigots.
can eat shit. You know what I mean? And we'll see you all next time, I think. Hopefully. You're not totally offended by everything that I've said.